James spent years pursuing a specific brand of isolation. Several times a year, he drove out to the Cherokee National Forest to hike deep into the backcountry, staying completely off the grid for days at a time. On the second afternoon of one such trip, his luck with the weather ran out. A massive bank of dark clouds moved in from the west, bringing a sudden temperature drop and wind strong enough to snap branches. Hiking at elevation with a metal-framed pack during a lightning storm forces a shift in priorities. The psychological need for shelter becomes so intense that standard wilderness caution is often discarded in favor of immediate physical safety. Scouring the woods for anything that could serve as a break from the downpour, James spotted a weathered structure through the trees. It was a tiny cabin appearing decades old, partially hidden by the dense forest growth. In a remote environment, a dry roof and a solid door are powerful lures. The survival instinct can easily focus on the relief of shelter, while blinding a person to the specific details of the space they are entering. James practically sprinted inside, instantly relieved to find the interior dry. He stripped out of his soaked gear and collapsed on the floor, focusing entirely on recovery rather than inspection. The cabin appeared to be a functional base camp. A relatively new sleeping bag sat in the corner, and a small table held water jugs and food cans, suggesting the space was used regularly by other hikers or hunters. These signs of recent human activity suggest a shared code of the trail, a communal safety that makes any subtle anomalies in the structure much harder to notice. As the adrenaline of the storm wore off, James began noticing odd details about the interior. He started with the walls and the door, moving from passive relief to active observation. The door handle used a standard latch mechanism. From the inside, it appeared to be a typical functioning exit. However, looking closer at the door, James saw a metal bracket on the outside frame, designed for a heavy padlock. With no corresponding inside latch, any lock placed outside would make the door impossible to open from within. The architecture of the cabin was built for containment. The hardware had been installed to ensure that control over the exit remained exclusively with someone standing on the porch. With the door potentially compromised, James checked the cabin's only other exit, a single glass window. The glass was intact, but it was held in place by heavy screws driven into each corner of the frame. Like the door bracket, these had been installed from the outside, turning the window into a permanent seal. Around the edges of the frame, James found deep, chaotic scratch marks gouged into the wood. These were not the marks of an animal. They were the unmistakable signs of a person attempting to pry the window open with their bare hands. The reality of the situation set in as the storm raged. Someone had modified this space to be a trap, and James could now hear the sound of something moving or scraping against the exterior walls. The isolation of the Cherokee forest now worked in tandem with the modified architecture. Every exit had been accounted for, and whoever had done the work was still there, standing somewhere in the darkness. James watched as the door groaned under the pressure of someone leaning their full weight against it from the other side. Seconds later, the window behind him shattered. An object was hurled through the broken glass, and the interior of the cabin erupted into an explosive fireball that spread across the walls in seconds. Despite the pouring rain and the metal roof, the structure burned with unnatural speed. This was only possible because the wood had been chemically treated with an accelerant to ensure a rapid, total ignition. With the room filling with heat, James smashed the door off its hinges and sprinted into the woods. He ran blindly through the rain, desperate to put distance between himself and the burning structure. Survival in this scenario required breaking the physical parameters of the trap before the evidence was consumed by the fire. James was eventually tackled by a silent attacker in the mud, but he managed to fight the man off and hide under fallen trees until daybreak. He reached a hospital with second-degree burns on his arm and neck. When the authorities eventually investigated, they found only a pile of ash in an unmapped section of the woods, leaving them with no forensic evidence to identify the builder. The experience ended James's solo hiking career. The risk tolerance he had built up over a decade disappeared, replaced by a permanent awareness of the cabin's architecture. In the deep woods, lightning and freezing rain are predictable risks. The presence of a predator who deliberately engineers the landscape to trap a human being is a different category of terror.